He was in the back room down the hallway and I was in the front of the house, and I just started hearing this like loud banging, like in threes. And it sounded like it was in the hallway, and I asked him, I was like, hey, are you banging on something? And he's like, no, I thought that was you. And anyways, so I walked down the hallway to where he's at, and all of a sudden I felt something just like grab me on the back of my neck, and it just, oh, it was so uncomfortable. I did
Chills.
not react well. I did not react well. I told him, I was like, we're leaving. I don't care if you have your crap. Like, you come back tomorrow. We're out. I'm gone because I drove. So you better get in.
Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Let Thy Single Eye Be Still. My name is Travis Cosentino, and with me today is Brittany Foster. Brittany Foster is a physical or psychic medium, but she's discovered her ability in sound healing, and this is her story. Hi, Brittany. How you doing?
Hey, Travis, I'm good. How are you?
Very good, very good. Thank you so much for joining me on this show. I'm really glad to have you here because I've heard your music and I've heard a little bit about your story, and I'm really excited to kind of deep dive into this whole thing.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's such a wonderful opportunity. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So let me ask you: were you born a medium? Did you have these abilities when you first came into this world?
When I was younger, I would definitely pick up on energies and spirits, I guess, especially I would go out into the forest a lot on my own, and I always felt like there were other beings around me. So we lived on a 6-acre ranch right at the back of a forest up in North Idaho, and I would walk out past the pasture into the forest, and I had this big, huge rock that I used to love to go to called Pride Rock, is what I named it. And I always felt like I was in the company of friends or loving spirits, and just I would be out there for hours. I mean, just playing with these energies and being immersed in that natural environment, and that forest energy. And so I don't think I understood it to the degree that I understand it now. To me, it was probably more like what parents write off as imaginary friends and things like that. But I did always feel very surrounded by other energies and presences.
And what did they look like? Can you explain that? Do you remember?
You know, the best that I could equate it to is kind of like very fairy energy, like little, they always seem little to me. And I don't know if that was just like my childhood or childlike mind making it more magical, because I think I probably would have been a little freaked out if it looked like a bunch of adults standing around me in the forest. So they always seemed very small to me, but the energy was always just so big. And yeah, and it's interesting because my grandma would talk about fairies a lot, and I always felt like that magical extra sense of other beings being around. And so as a kid, I just always called them fairies.
I love that. I love that. That's interesting that your grandma also mentioned it, because
Mhm.
I know that the mediumship it follows down the lineage and families, especially on the female side. And
Mhm.
so I'm wondering, does your mother have any abilities also?
She does, actually. My mom, she's got quite a few clairvoyant abilities. Yeah, she's a Reiki master. She's cleared houses, done a lot of spiritual clearings. She does theta energy. She's very, very gifted.
Wow, that's very, very cool.
Yeah.
I um I didn't really have anybody like that in my life growing up, but I love that. I love that. I mean, you're so lucky. You're so lucky that you were born with a family that embraces their abilities rather than tries to hush it down.
Yeah, yeah. I am. I'm very lucky. My mom really didn't start opening up about this stuff until she was in her, I think, mid 40s. So we grew up in more of a religious home when I was younger. My mom comes from a very Christian family, so we went to church and everything, did that for a few years till I was about 7, and then we just kind of left. But it wasn't until I was a young adult that my mom really started talking to me about this kind of stuff.
Interesting. And was it just because you were more verbal about it with her?
Well, it was more, I was aware that she was going into, homes and clearing them, and that she was developing more knowledge and understanding of her gifts. At that time, I didn't really have a ton of interest in it. I was probably 18, 19 years old, about to go to college. I had a lot more other things on my mind.
Sure.
So, but after I had my first really jarring spiritual experience, I had an entity experience that scared the crap out of me. And that was really when my mom and I started talking more about this kind of stuff so that I could understand it, because I had several experiences happen after that that also scared me. And so it got to a point where I felt like, okay, I need to learn more about this just so I can protect myself. Because waking up in the middle of the night with an entity at the end of your bed staring at you like it wants to kill you is not fun. So it was not a good experience, but it opened the door, and I think I needed to have those scarier, more jarring experiences to really be pushed to explore and understand, and then over time develop it into this very light, beautiful exchange that I get to have with other people when they have family members that have passed on, that'll come through, that have things that they need to communicate, or that they want you to feel or know. So my experience, I had to go through the kind of dark and ugly before I got to go to the super light, beautiful.
I think that's really a natural progression, honestly,
Yeah,
to
I think a lot
especially
of people do.
even for somebody who's not a psychic medium,
Yeah.
if they are haunted, for example, you have to go through the darkness to go into the light, kind of thing, and to respect it, because there is evil in this world.
I went through some difficult things and I was very cut off. And so I didn't feel or see those for years, for a while. So it did come back in my 20s, and that's when it kind of came back with a vengeance. It's like, yeah, okay, you're ready. Better pay attention.
Was it just the distractions of like school and teen life that kind of kept you away from all of that, or do you think maybe it was food related, or just sort of this culture, social aspect of things? Like, what was it, do you think, that shut you out from all of it?
A part of it was I was bullied a lot at a young age from my peers and even some of my teachers, and so I was pretty shut down from that. However, I would say that food definitely plays a portion, because in those teenage years, my parents never really bought a lot of unhealthy stuff. We always had fruits, vegetables, and good meats and things like that. There was never like the junk food cereal or Pop Tarts and things like that. So I always loved going to my friends' houses that had those kinds of treats. And then
Sure.
once I got a job, of course, my money went to like junk food and eating out and all the things you do as a young kid. And so I have noticed as an adult, if my diet doesn't stay healthy, I don't feel as much. So I do think that our food plays a role. And that was definitely a time in my life where I was consuming a lot more of that stuff, because you can and you don't really see the results like you do in your 30s. It's so fascinating delving more into the healthy lifestyle along with spirituality, because all of these healthy choices that you make directly correlate to how tapped in you are.
It's so true. It's so true. And I a couple of years ago had suffered with terrible autoimmune symptoms that basically was destroying my life,
Oh,
and I had to switch to a vegan diet, and I was detoxing every day with celery juice and among other different types of like detoxes and things through a medical medium, Anthony William medical medium, and it saved my life.
wow.
He saved my life, and I'm just so grateful to have that knowledge and to be able to share it with other people that are suffering with autoimmune.
Yeah.
It's game changing, and it makes a huge difference. And I especially notice when I eat something I shouldn't, how not only my body reacts, but how I react spiritually, and how my connection gets cut off, especially with alcohol. Alcohol, that is immediately cuts off your connection to God.
Yeah.
So it makes a difference, huge difference. But let's get back in your story without going too far off the
Yeah.
rails. What led up to this awful spiritual experience where you've got this spirit that's haunting you. What happened there? How did that happen?
So that was a very interesting experience. A guy that I was dating at the time, we were in the Army and we were stationed at Fort Bliss, Texas, which was right on the border of Juarez. He was renting a house, and that house had had some pretty dark things happen in it, and it had left behind residual dark energy and an entity essentially that was there. And my boyfriend at the time had mentioned some weird experiences that he had had, like the sink faucet would turn on in the middle of the night in the kitchen. One night he woke up and he saw a man's suit standing in front of him. No face or anything, but it looked like a body was in it.
Trippy.
Yeah. Just a lot of weird experiences that he had shared. And so anyways, we had to get our gear because we had a field operation. So we went there at night, which was stupid. But we went there after dark and we were getting his gear, and I just got really uncomfortable when we were there. And he was in the back room down the hallway and I was in the front of the house, and I just started hearing this like loud banging, like in threes. And it sounded like it was in the hallway. And I asked him, I was like, hey, are you banging on something? And he's like, no, I thought that was you. And anyways, so I walked down the hallway to where he's at. And all of a sudden I felt something just like grab me on the back of my neck. And it just, oh, it was so uncomfortable. I did not react well. I did not react well. I told him, I was like, we're leaving. I don't care if you have your crap. Like, you can come back tomorrow. We're out. I'm gone because I drove. So you better get in. So it was terrifying. And we went back the next day. And as we were leaving, nothing happened when we were there, but I was still highly uncomfortable. When we were leaving, everything was gated. There were bars on the windows. There was a gate on the door to the front of the house. And I saw this young woman in what looked like a very ratty dress, grabbing the bars and just shaking them and screaming like she was trying to get out. And there was not actually physically a living woman standing there. It was very much seeing a spirit that had experienced some very, very dark things that were there. And I had come to find out later that the man that lived there decades prior had been accused of some pretty heinous things along the lines of rape and murder and things like that. So it was a very very dark experience. It absolutely terrified me. And then I had another experience. I don't know if it was weeks or maybe a few months later, but I woke up in the middle of the night and there was an older woman standing at the base of my bed, staring at me. And just, her eyes were just dark and I don't know. I don't really know how to explain the way that her eyes made me feel, aside from just utterly terrified. I don't know if you've ever had somebody look at you like they really want to hurt you. But it was very much like that. And I knew that her presence there was insidious and malicious. It was not a light visit. There was no love. So, and I had called my mom after the incident at the house, and then again after this one, and because they both scared me very much. And I mean, I'm 22 at this point, so I'm an adult. It's not like I'm afraid to go to sleep or afraid of the dark and things like that. But these feelings or these things that I saw really shook me, and that's really when I started asking more questions and doing more research and talking to other people that I knew. I don't know if you can count like that spirit that was at the edge of my bed. I told her to go away. And anyways, that was probably the first time I'd ever really talked to them besides, being a kid. And I would talk to those guys all the time. But
did you verbally say that, or was it like a telepathic thing?
I verbally said it to that entity that looked like an older woman, because I was, that was a little too much for me. So my sister and I, she's younger, we're very connected. I had a dream about her that was very, very vivid, and there was an entity that was after her, and it was kind of in the guise of a little girl. Um, but you knew that it was dark, it was evil, it was, the little girl was it was a disguise to make it seem more innocent. Anyways, that entity was chasing my sister around in the dream and trying to get to her. I ended up in the dream kind of like killing this entity. And somehow in that act, it detached from my sister and attached to me, and I brought it back through into my waking world. So when I woke up that morning, she was standing right next to my bed, and she followed me around the house the whole day. And it was just this anger that I had removed her from what she wanted, which was my sister, who was very vulnerable at this time. And anyways, I was so terrified. I was staying at my parents' house because I was home on leave at this point, I think for Christmas. And my mom was gone, and I went to my dad, and I'm just crying because I've never been so scared in my life, because I felt like I was physically and spiritually in danger with whatever this was. And when my mom got home, she was able to get rid of it. But I never wanted to be in a situation like that again, where I felt somewhat held hostage by a negative entity and terrorized. And so that's when I really started learning, these entities can't stand love. They cannot exist and stay in a place where love is being directed at them or is filling the area. And then putting a protective light around myself. And, when I first started doing it, it seemed really silly to close my eyes and imagine this like protective light around me and everything. But when you start to actually feel what you're doing, it's very, very validating. And then I never really had a negative experience like that again after that. I have had some negative things that I've pulled off of people in sessions, but now that I know how to get rid of them, it's a very, very different experience. And I've also learned, especially through sound, how to keep my vibration to a higher place where I don't encounter those things nearly as much. So, and when I do, I'm not afraid of them anymore.
After this had happened, did you reach out to your sister?
I did. That night, something really awful had happened to her, like an actual crime that I'm not going to get into because that's very personal to my family. But um, it was very interesting that something so evil had happened to her that night for it to have essentially, manifested into an entity. And she even had called me the next day and crying, and yeah, it was a very surreal, eye-opening experience.
It's almost like you inadvertently exorcised a demon from your sister.
Yeah, I didn't realize at the time, and I had worked with a lady who is very, very energetically in tune and taught me a lot. Her name's Patty, and she told me that in my dreams I was traveling, my astral body was traveling, and that I had essentially removed that but brought it with me. So she taught me how to not bring those things back into your reality.
Which is why it's so important to protect ourselves. That's a great example of why we should protect ourselves so that we don't have attachments follow us home. And I know that because I used to be a ghost hunter and I had spirits follow me home like an idiot.
And
It's
it's
not
not fun
great.
when they do.
It sucks. I
Yeah.
don't recommend it.
Excuse me. Well,
Okay,
and now
don't die.
I wear labradorite every day, but especially I will not go to sleep without wearing a piece of labradorite. So,
Yeah, stones and crystals. Some people think it's so foo-foo, but when you're so tapped in, especially when you're on a really clean diet and you hold a crystal in your hand that's got good energy on it, you can feel it. And the
yeah.
same goes for stones. Stones absorb a lot of the negative energy. They're great. I mean,
hmm
they're really great to have around. And I mean, it's not new age. This is ancient. This
Very.
is people have known about this stuff for thousands of years. It works. and
Mhm.
people today still do it, and it's not foo-foo, it
No.
really works. Crystals, especially quartz crystals. Quartz crystals are some of the most powerful crystals that you can have, and quartz crystal is used in all of our technology. It's in all of our phones. Our everything that we use today has quartz crystals in it, just about in terms of
Exactly.
technology.
Yep.
So clearly, there is science to back up. Yes, that these are amazing at storing and transferring energy. So
Mhm.
just saying.
Well, and it's funny that you say that too, because they are being used in modern day technology. So clearly, they have way bigger uses than most people understand. People look at it and they're like, oh, it's a shiny, pretty rock. Cool. And not everybody's going to understand. My dad is very open and understanding now to energy. But I'll give him a crystal and he'll be like, I don't feel anything. I'm like, okay, well, you just don't, that's okay. That's fine. You don't have to feel anything. But I'll do a session on him and he feels a ton. Whenever my mom or I do Reiki on him, he sees colorful lights when he closes his eyes. So um, you're not everybody's gonna feel it the same way. And like you said, the cleaner you are, the cleaner your diet is, and your exposure to things like all of the technology that we have, the more you will probably feel. So yeah, I
So
think,
true.
and honestly, even if crystals don't do anything, they're pretty and I like them, so I don't care.
So true. We're getting so steered off here, but that's okay because these are fun conversations.
They are. I love
They really
talking about this stuff.
All right, so you have this crazy, crazy experience, but also beautiful because you basically saved your sister from this freaking demon. And okay, so now it's time to get serious. What happens next?
So from there, that's really when I picked up tarot and started just exposing myself to as much knowledge and learning opportunities as I could to try and understand this stuff. But as I started doing tarot, that's really when I had more concentrated conversations.
Why did you decide to do that?
So it's actually really funny. I've always loved crystals, even as a little girl, before anybody had told me that they have like metaphysical, spiritual qualities to them. I always loved them. So we were in a crystal shop, and they had tarot and oracle decks, and I was just really drawn to them, and I couldn't really explain it. But I ended up getting my first deck, and I didn't buy one that day. It was gifted to me by a friend. So it was very interesting to be so drawn to them and then have somebody gift it to me relatively recent after that. So I started utilizing it for myself and just having some really wonderful awarenesses and feeling like I tapped into this kind of like hidden knowledge. As far as making decisions and navigating my life and stuff like that and understanding what I was experiencing, and then eventually I just started. I had so many decks at that point. I had a friend over and she's like, you do a lot of tarot and oracle decks, and asked if I would do a reading for her, and I was like, well, I've never read for somebody before, but I did, and it was a really, really emotional and powerful experience. And that's really when I realized that, wow, okay, I can kind of be a conduit for people for information that they might need, or messages that they need to have delivered to them. And it just really kind of grew from there. And I do readings for close friends, and my family. My mom loves getting readings. So I've done them for people that I don't know. I have it on my website, and I've had people book sessions. And it's a really wonderful experience because I'm always surprised every single time doing the reading at what comes through and how deeply it resonates for people. Like it's I don't think it's something that I will ever get used to. I don't know if you've ever felt like that in your experiences, but when it resonates so deeply with people after, it's always such a beautiful surprise.
It's so interesting that we're talking about tarot because I have an episode coming out tonight with Angela Potts that I interviewed last week, and she had a very negative experience from using tarot cards. And what is your, um, I guess, what is your experience or opinion on tarot? Do you think that tarot is innately evil, or what do you think what do you think that's all about?
No, I don't think that tarot is innately evil. I don't think that any of them are, to be honest. I'll be honest, I've never touched a Ouija board. I never will. Um, my mom had always told me before utilizing any of these tools that you set very clear precedents of who it is that you want to communicate with. So before I do a reading or a session or anything on anybody or myself, no matter what tool I'm using, I always ask that all answers come from a source of pure, good light, intention, and love. And if you're not setting those things energetically, those boundaries, you're really allowing anything to come in and communicate with you, from my understanding of how all of these things work. And so I can see how she may have had that experience, and just caution people that these are tools, and just like any other tool in this world, like a knife or a gun, it can be used or wielded for light or dark purposes. And it's your responsibility to set the intention ahead of time of what and who you want to receive from.
Thank you. I 100% agree with you. I believe that we all have a personal responsibility to protect ourselves and those around us.
Yes.
And I think that Angela, bless her heart, she probably just didn't know what she was getting involved in, because
Yeah.
the spirit world is unpredictable. You don't know what you're going to be dealing with. And tarot to me it's very similar to a Ouija board.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, with Ouija boards, every time people do those, something bad happens.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it. So if you're watching this, stay the hell away from those things. They're
Yeah.
bad.
Leave
They're
it
bad.
alone.
They're not kids' toys. I know you can buy it at a kid's toy store, but that doesn't mean you should use it. It has to do with like what you put your intentions into. And so this is where I struggle, because now that I'm, a Christian again, and the Bible very specifically is against it, and so it's very difficult for me as someone who's been connected and in that way to sort of shut off something that naturally is a part of who I am. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
difficult.
Well, and I think that everybody needs to be aware of and understand, because this stuff is trending right now, and it's very much being promoted out there. What you are tapping into is a big deal, and understanding what you're doing and how to go about it safely is so important before you embark on utilizing these types of tools, because I don't think anybody goes into this, unless they're just a real thrill seeker, saying, I want to connect with a demon and see what they say. Like, I don't think that's why most people are picking these things up. I think people are looking for guidance outside of themselves sometimes. And what I think that tarot can really do for you, if you set that intention, is it helps you illuminate your own internal guidance, which is connected to all of the answers anyways. Sometimes we just
Hmm.
don't believe that or see that.
It's so true. A lot of us, we don't go within, we don't meditate, we don't sit with God,
Yeah.
and that's a shame. A lot of us should be doing that, and it's difficult today, especially because I think today, as technology improves and as this world continues on, we're even more distracted. 20 years ago it was sports. Sports was the big thing that distracted the world, but now you've got the internet, and you've got shorts, and you've got all these things going on, and you've got this entertainment center in your hand that's just keeping you constantly distracted.
Yeah.
There's just distractions everywhere, so it's
Mhm.
hard to shut that all off and just go within,
Yeah.
because you're right, the answers are within, for
Mhm.
sure.
Well, and I think the real freedom is within too, because all of these distractions really are just keeping you a slave to them and a slave to a system that you may not want to participate in. So, I think that when you can put the phone down or the TV or the laptop or whatever it is, and connect human to human, or connect internally with yourself and tap into that higher self, because everybody has it. We all have access to the answers and what the trajectory of our life in our highest and best good is supposed to look like. But you have to give yourself that power back and disconnect from the things that are keeping you hostage and keeping you distracted. and keeping you busy with sometimes stuff that doesn't get you anywhere.
That is so, so true. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's continue on with the story. So after going through all of this, what was it that led you into your next experience?
I ended up having my mom attune me in Reiki and starting to utilize Reiki. And I've been a singer ever since I was a little girl. I was classically trained for over 20 years. I've done opera. The only genre I really can't do is rap. And so I was exposed to sound healing and the crystal bowls. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I noticed that when I was exposed to those vibrational sounds, I felt the most tapped in that I have ever felt. And I ended up getting a crystal bowl gifted to me, and I started just singing with it. And it was like I unlocked this part of myself, my whole purpose, my whole reason for being created in this vessel that I'm in, and what I am here to do, and that is to create environments for people to heal themselves with the gentle assistance of sound.
So how do these sound bowls work on the human body?
So the sound bowls, which I don't even really use those anymore, I use more targeted solfeggio frequencies. But basically, it's all about vibration. And what I love about this, if you really wanted to geek out about it, Tesla's work goes all the way into this stuff. And it's just scratching the surface of some incredible technology and opportunities to understand frequency and sound better. And essentially, what it's doing is it's vibrating your body at a certain hertz frequency. And different parts of your body are meant to vibrate at certain frequencies. Oftentimes, we'll have experiences or accidents that kind of knock you out of that frequency that you're meant to be in. And generally, it puts you into a lower frequency. When you're sick, your body tends to resonate at below 90 hertz frequency. So essentially, being exposed to these bowls or these solfeggio frequencies raises the entire vibration of the body. Most people don't know this, but the first thing that develops in utero is your auditory nerve. It's your ability to hear. And your auditory nerve is connected to every single organ in your body. So explain to me why it would be connected to literally everything if sound was not meant as a beautiful way to help you heal and get back into alignment, back into the right frequency of your body. And I've had some pretty incredible experiences with people who have come and had a one-on-one session or come to a sound bath. I had one woman who had a rash for years. She went to so many doctors, and in one of our sessions, we worked on it and realized that that rash was a result of her really denying and keeping her true self shoved down and away and not expressing it. And so her body was reacting. And there was a vision that I was given during her session of her as a little girl in these like red cowboy boots. And she was just like so herself and so big and bright, and her energy was just palpable. And she got to see that part of herself again, and she's like, I gotta put on my little red boots again and show up in life that way. And she did, and she called me a couple days later and she's like, this rash is completely gone. It's gone. Like, I don't understand where it went.
Wow.
It was amazing. And I'm not saying, I mean, and I asked her, did you change anything in your diet? Did you take any new meds? Nothing had changed other than she had the session and she was implementing and integrating what had come through for her in that session.
That is amazing. And that happened the next day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
freaking awesome.
So sound is really incredible. There's so many scientific journals that have been created and studies that have been done. They have actually found that vibrating the body at 40 hertz frequency can have incredible results for Alzheimer's and dementia, to the degree that not only it slows the progression of plaque buildups on the brain, it actually can reverse them. There was a doctor who did a study with a woman who was very, very progressed in her dementia, to the point where she was having a difficult time with conversation. She couldn't really engage in a conversation like you and I are having. Word recall was very difficult, and her ability to ambulate and her gait were affected. And she went into this doctor's office, sat in this chair device that he had that vibrated the body at 40 hertz frequency, and was so impressed after, I think, 9 months of that treatment. It had gotten to a point where you would never know she had dementia. She still had the disease, and the brain scans did show that there were still plaques on the brain, but she had reversed so much of the symptoms that had been really affecting her quality of life. They ended up going and traveling all over the world after this, and took
After one session?
no. She had like 9 months of sessions.
Oh, okay, okay.
But they went and traveled the whole world, and the doctor ended up finding them a similar device that they could take that would vibrate her body that she could sit in, and continued the 40 hertz frequency, and met her a few years later when she should have been, essentially on hospice in a home, nonverbal, based on the progression of her disease when he met her. You still would not know that she had dementia. She was able to conversate, ambulate. She was thriving. So
Wow.
it's amazing what sound can do. A lot of this stuff obviously isn't shared because Big Pharma would lose a lot of money. And I'm not saying like sound's going to heal everything and you should stop going to your doctor. Like keep going to your doctor, but consider sound, consider solfeggio frequencies. They've done studies on them that show that they actually do help in DNA and cellular repair. They do detox the body. I mean, the science is there. It's just not being promoted. It's not being shared to the degree that it needs to be shared. And Tesla, one of the quotes that I love most is that the key to the future, and I'm probably just absolutely mutilating this quote, but the thought process of it is the key to the future is through sound, frequency, and vibration.
369.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that going down the music rabbit hole in spirituality has just completely blown my world wide open. And I have over a decade in Western medicine. I specialized in Alzheimer's and dementia. I was a community educator for the Alzheimer's Association. I have worked in memory care. I have done one-on-one hospice. I have held people's hands as they have passed away. And this healing opportunity is so needed. And I think that there's such a beautiful potential to mesh Western medicine and holistic care, because we don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick treatment system that just puts a Band-Aid on it and eventually causes more problems with medication. So if you could utilize these holistic therapies in addition to the Western medicine that is out there that's actually helpful, I think that our health would look so different. That landscape would change so drastically, in such a beautiful and positive way. People don't need to be dying of cancer. We don't
I
need to
agree.
be we don't need to be suffering all of these awful diseases that exist out there if we were really given access and the information of all of these things that are available for you.
I think if we became less dependent on them and more dependent on each other, that we could heal each other.
100%. I wholeheartedly believe that. What I'm working on right now is creating some actual like albums that are at 40 hertz frequency, and then I'll include like the singing and stuff over them. And I do have a bunch of connections in the Boise memory care communities, that would play those for their residents, and they haven't played the ones that I'm going to create, but I have given them that information. And I did have a friend let me know that she had been playing the 40 hertz frequency for the residents in the common areas for a few weeks, and they actually noticed a decrease in the need for PRNs, which are essentially behavioral medications for when people are experiencing a lot of anxiety or anger or whatever it is that they're experiencing. But I've always hated PRNs because they're essentially sedating you into compliance. So they had less of a need to use those. They had less sundowners. People's appetites were better. That is another thing that can be very difficult in memory care, is that the appetite changes. So I think that there's so much potential here, and my dream and my goal is to just get as much of it out there as possible.
I freaking love that. I absolutely love that. That is so cool. I when I first got into filmmaking, I was doing stories about people that inspired me,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a guy in the desert. I lived in Palm Desert, Southern California, and there was a guy out there. His name is Billy Cordell, and he had been trained by Tibetan monks to do sound bowl healing. And I had talked with you about this before, but the way he explained it in terms of frequency and the way that he worked with his clients was beautiful. So he would sit there with his patient or his clients, and he would play the sound bowl, and he could, because he was so in tune with the bowl, he could hear the frequencies hitting the body, and whenever the body would have like a bad area, the ping would come back to him, and he would know immediately that, oh, I need to work on this area and I need to apply this frequency. And I was like, whoa, what? Like, for
Yeah.
real? And so there's something to this, and yes, we have the science to back it up, but we have these experiences that people have. And then, you're telling me this, how it's affecting people in such a positive way. And, somebody could look at that and say, oh, well, it could have been something else. I'm sure it could have been something else, but it could have also been this. Sound healing is real. And I have another experience I just want to share really quickly. Have you ever heard of a place called Integratron?
No.
So Integratron is located in the desert in Southern California. I think it's about an hour and a half from Palm Springs north. So it was supposed to be a time machine. A rocket scientist, and he had a dream. He was an engineer. He had a dream and a vision to build this time machine, and he did. And it looks like, from the outside, it just looks like this dome structure in the middle of nowhere. But inside of it, he had all of these like guitar strings, and it was wrapped around in this very specific type of pattern. And he had all these other things inside of it, but most of us don't know what was in there because the military came and took it all when he passed away. But he had, there was an article written about him that he was creating a time machine and all this stuff. And of course, he got government. They were spying on him. They wanted his technology, but he wasn't going to share it. And he ended up dying of a heart attack. And immediately after he passed away, they came and cleared everything out on the inside of it. The only thing that remains is the structure. Well, there are people that own this property, and there's some magic to the design of this building. And so now it's become an attraction, and people, sound bowl healers, will do sound bowl sessions inside this dome structure.
Oh,
And
wow.
the way the sound reverberates throughout the inside of this dome, you feel it in your body in an exponential way. It is like the most amazing way to experience a sound bowl session. So they do this thing every weekend. People pay like $75 per person to go to this thing and do these sound healings. And it's really cool because when you sit in the middle of this dome, you can sing to the loudest you want to, and a person right next to you can barely hear you.
Wow.
It's like a whisper. But if you go to the ends, if you go to one end and the other person on the other end, you can have a conversation with each other like you're right next to each other. That's how the sound works in this dome, and it's just wild, And it kind of like defies logic,
Yeah.
And so I highly recommend it for anybody, especially someone like yourself. Definitely check it out. Go online, check out Integratron. You're gonna be like, wow, I have to go here,
Yeah, it sounds like I need to take a road trip, but that's really neat. I hadn't heard of that place before, but it sounds an awful lot like the Hermetic chambers that the ancient Egyptians built. I don't know if you've seen much about those, but they're incredible. There's one chamber where they actually were able to study the resonance, and that chamber vibrated at, I think it was like 111 hertz frequency, like
No
to the
way.
T. It was perfect, absolutely perfect. And I mean, these chambers were carved, and they were intentionally structured the way that they were to create these. And they had some that they called miracle chambers, where people would go in with, whatever diseases or illnesses that they were dying from, and they would come out completely healed, according to, the evidence that has been written down from back then. So I mean, I think that the ancients had way more knowledge than we think that they did when it comes to sound, and a lot of our gifts that I think that everybody has the ability. We say that we're psychic mediums and that we have these. I think everybody has the ability to tap into this stuff,
I
to tap
100%
into
agree with
this
you.
energy, to tap into that part of themselves. It's about being present, the intention, and looking for it. If you don't have one of those experiences that just kind of shakes you into paying attention, but if you want to tap into this part of yourself, it's there. You have access to it. You just need to learn and to show up, and to do it. And you can tap into these things. You can tap into this knowledge. You can have these conversations just like you and I get to experience. And yeah, I think it's so amazing, the history that is there around sound, and mediums and psychics, and people with these gifts. There's never been in a time in history where people have not been reported of having these kinds of gifts. And so
It's so true that you say that because I know for a fact that some people have played sound bowls inside the pyramids, and they said that the acoustics in there are amazing. Like it's
mhm,
designed for that. And I have heard stories of people that would go into the pyramids and they would be healed. They would go into it and come out of it healed. So
yeah,
there's certainly something to that.
yeah.
So this is great. All right. So moving on. So you're inspired to do sound healing, and now you're working with all these other people, and now you're creating your own albums and your music, and you've experienced firsthand how you've been able to help people, get rid of a rash. I mean, next day it's gone. That's
Hmm.
great. Um, I'm kind of curious. Psychic people or whatever intuitives, they're more in tune with all their experiences, especially empaths. They're very in tune with like everybody else around them. And so you feel into things much differently than just the average person. So I'm
Hmm.
curious, when you're doing your sound sessions and you're in that sort of mantra, what are you feeling?
So for me, it's a really cool experience, because my sound healings, it's all intuitively channeled in that moment. None of what we do is rehearsed. None of the melodies that you hear or the meditation that we embark on is pre-planned. It's really neat for me because it comes through as a lot of spirits communicate with me. I will, when I've done readings for people or when I've worked on them one on one, I will actually see things or hear things. And it's kind of like seeing a movie or watching something. And during the sound baths or my one on one sound healings, I am not only hearing the notes that I'm supposed to be singing, but I'm also getting to see the meditation, or the sound journey that you are on, and basically just putting it into words so that you're joining me on the vision that is being downloaded and given to you for that experience.
Wow, that is amazing. I love that.
It's such a gift for me to get to be able to do this, and to get to have those experiences. It's not just healing for the people that get to come. I get something out of it every time too.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So what do you think is the ultimate goal for you with what you're doing now?
We're all connected. We're all one, and I believe that. And I think that getting to have these experiences, you're just having more pieces of ourselves reflected in each other. And I think that's the stuff that makes community, it makes the world more kind, it makes more love and more healing for everybody. And so I just want to create environments for that to transpire and for people to experience.
I love that. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
That's a beautiful way to express that and to feel that way. You know, how can somebody find you?
I have a website, soundofawakening.com. There's links to all of my stuff on there. I don't have too much on YouTube yet, but I am working on getting some content available on there as well. And then I do have my album coming out on all of the streaming sites, so it will be on Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music. You just look up Sound of Awakening and you'll find it.
It's beautiful.
Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. It's been such a great time chatting with you and getting to share all this fun stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, what an amazing story. You've got an amazing, amazing story.
Thank you.
And, you know, I look forward to being able to chat with you again in the future.
Me too. Thank you so much. I hope you have a beautiful week.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Somewhere on
How
here.
to hang up on
I
it.
do know how to use this thing.
I'm like, how do I hang up?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear that dog?
It's not very loud.
It's loud for me, and they're chasing the squirrels in the backyard.
Oh, no.
Freak out when they see these squirrels, because the squirrels would just be up there in the tree just laughing at them,
Oh,
and they
yeah.
can't ever
Taunting
catch
them.
them, you know. So,
Yeah.
oh my god. Anyways,